everybody, and welcome to the first series of the Humber and North Yorkshire AHP Faculty podcast. In this episode, we'll be exploring AHP strategic leadership, including what it involves, the skills that are required, and why it's important. Today, I am very fortunate to be joined by three outstanding strategic AHP leaders from within our system. So let's start with a quick round of introductions before we go into our discussion. So my name is Rachel Wannop. I am the Chief AHP for Humber and North Yorkshire Integrated Care Board. I hold a delegated portfolio from the Executive Director of Nursing, including AHPs and strategic leadership. My role sits across the ICB nursing quality functions and spans across the Integrated Care Partnership, encompassing the 14 allied health professions. I provide system-wide strategic direction and assurance against the underuse, overuse and misuse of AHP's contribution to the NHS long-term plan, recovery and transformation programmes and emerging system, regional and national priorities. I am a dietitian by background and I have over 20 years experience of working in acute provider organisations and at NHS England. Noma, over to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Norma Makanda and I am Deputy Chief Allied Health Professional and Professional Lead for Occupational Therapists at Rotherham, Doncaster and South Humber Trust. As if that's not enough, I also have another role, a Strategic Advisory Group Chair for Suzanne Rastrick. Thank you.
Christy?
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Christy Francis. I'm a Deputy Chief Operating Officer and Chief AHP at City Healthcare Partnership. I'm a physiotherapist by background and I am internationally qualified. I am a member of the Exec Board and I manage a large portfolio of services within the organisation. Thank you for having me.
Vicky?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Vicky Mulvanatui, or Vicky MT as most people know me. Deputy Chief AHP at York and Scarborough Teaching Hospitals, physiotherapist by background, paediatric specialty. Thanks for having me.
Great, so let's kick off the discussion. So let's have a think about what are the key skills required to be an effective leader. Christy?
Okay, thank you. I think for me the number one is emotional intelligence. I think you've got to know your people. You've got to know what place they're actually from, what kind of things might be going on with them. And as leaders, you are always faced with challenging decisions, difficult decisions, and you are working with people. Ultimately, the decisions that you make as a leader will have an impact on somebody, positive or otherwise. So my top one would be to have really good emotional intelligence.
I agree. I think, and also knowing yourself as well, that self-awareness. With that emotional intelligence comes that learning about yourself. So being a good listener, yeah. I think I draw on my coaching skills in terms of also, listening to hear people more than trying to jump on solution focused or solution based. And I think as AHPs, we really like to deliver. So it's hard to sit and watch someone and without having to swoop in and change. But it's just learning to listen and listen to give solutions or help someone arrive at a solution.
Totally agree. Communication is an absolute key of an effective leader. And it doesn't matter which level of leadership you're operating in, and being able to communicate what you're trying to say and more importantly, what's in it for people is a way of getting what you want out of and the best out of people, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just want to add to what Norma said as well, because it's really important to be aware of what's going on with your own emotional space as well, because it's not easy. It's not easy there, and often it's incredibly hard to sort of hold all that back and actually deal with the problem at hand sometimes. So we live in a world where compassionate and inclusive leadership is so important. I would say any effective leader should have those qualities as their toolkit, really, I would say.
I agree with you. I think very much about leading from the front and role modelling those values and behaviours are fundamental for defining the culture and the direction of travel. I think for me, from a system perspective, it's been a really effective enabler. So facilitating, influencing, persuading, negotiating and holding people to account is also really valuable skills, and having the resilience to be able to do that effectively.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as AHPs, we are problem solvers. We are trained to be problem solvers. And I know the topic of discussion here is strategic leadership, but, there are the qualities of the person that comes in there as well. And I think AHPs offer a really good platform, being that natural problem solver. Often in the strategic space, you talk a lot about a problem, and your discussions are a lot geared around, well, we've got this problem, what we're going to do about it. But I think that's where AHP leadership, particularly in that strategic space, comes in. Well, what are the options then? How about if we do it differently? And I think that's something is important for leadership as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep your own sense of self. Good leaders are authentic, aren't they? They're people you can come to, talk to, have that conversation. It means something. That open door policy that enables people to have that conversations.
Yes,
really important.
And influencing for result, I think. So sometimes, as you're saying, we're enablers. You don't necessarily have to do, but to influence in certain places. And you mentioned role modelling. It's always good to see someone who looks like you. Yeah. It validates you in some form or some shape. And there's recent studies that show that. And I think I'm really proud to be a Black woman who's a leader in this space, and it really, I think I would like to see more people reaching up and doing their best to do that. And I also say I lift as I climb, so whenever I see someone who looks like me, I want to say it's okay, come, it can be done.
Yeah. I suppose our reality is negotiable, isn't it? We could decide what we want to see the future to be, and we're all from different backgrounds. I'm an out LGBT member, and we've got Black community, we've got international colleagues, and we've got dietitians, which is all fabulous. But I suppose the point we're trying to make is that we're better with a diverse workforce,
Absolutely.
aren't we? And our leadership comes from recognising each other's skills and attributes, and supporting them and growing them.
Absolutely.
Great, so let's move on to the next question. So how does AHP strategic leadership improve patient safety and quality? Noma, do you want to kick off?
Yes, I always talk about quality and safety and how it links into the workforce. Someone says, and to quote Professor Michael West, talks a lot around compassionate leadership. When people show up as their authentic selves at work and show up and are supported and are listened to, they do their best. When you listen to people and allow them to thrive at work, they do their best. And in our business, who's actually gaining? It's our patients. Our patients' outcomes are improved because of our workforce that is listened to. So I really think it's key to always, when you think quality, think about your workforce. What are you doing to support that workforce so that our patients can actually get a good outcome?
And I think it goes back to that problem-solving skills as AHPs that we mentioned, because the NHS, as we know in the media and everything, is in a really challenging place, and the system, as over the years, has not been able to cater for the demands and the challenging needs and the complexities. But AHPs, this is where AHPs come in that strategic leadership space as well, to sort of say we've got the solutions to some of the real wicked challenging problems. I know the Labour government is really looking at maybe another new 10-year plan for the NHS. And one of the things that is being talked about is bringing that care more closer to home, not hospital-based care, maybe community-based care. But this requires a lot of transformation, communication and engaging with people as patients as well. Ourselves as people working in healthcare, if you know ourselves, if you have a problem, I know that this is not an A&E issue. I know this is not something that even I need to go to an urgent treatment centre. I know what is the right thing, but people are a lot more aware. But as leaders, we probably need to be a little bit more bold and brave to achieve that transition and transformation. But really good engagement with patients, I think, can play a significant part in improving that quality and patient experience.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think the NHS runs on discretionary effort, doesn't it? We don't work for the NHS because it's a job. It's a vocation. It's a being. It's a way of life, and we do that because our patient care matters to us. Doesn't matter what role we're doing in an organisation or in a system. Ultimately, we're trying to make things better for patients. So whether that's on the front line giving care, whether it's doing training to support people to understand how to empower patients to take that responsibility. All of that will contribute to patient care. Of course, we've got all of the policies and procedures that go in place to support people to play safe and to do the things that we're asking them to do. But we need people to take ownership of that patients matter and that patient safety matters. And that's part of us role modelling, that's the only way to do that. Some of our AHPs will be, and one of these podcasts will be talking about how research and innovation supports patient care. AHPs are really well placed to do that, aren't they, from the fact that they're trained to work in evidence-based practice, they are trained to look at what's effective and what's working, and that will help us improve patient care.
I think for me that the AHP contribution with regard to outcome is often poorly understood, and that's resulting in missed opportunities for us as AHPs to get involved in that transformation. And I think what's really important for me is to improve the quality and safety, is to ensure that we've got the appropriate AHP leadership at all levels within the organisation, to release our potential and to increase our voice visibility as well as our contribution.
Agree. When AHPs are part of the multidisciplinary discussion, it looks at the holistic kind of patient, doesn't it? And all of their requirements, not just what they need from a care perspective. So I couldn't agree more. And
I think we're in a very fortunate position that today we have more AHP leaders than we have had for a very long time. So it's a very exciting space to be in to move forward. So let's have another discussion about what we foresee are the key leadership challenges in healthcare at the moment. Vicky, do you want to kick off?
Of course. I think anyone say that significant change across our political environment will change the nature of how we look over the next 10 years. The Darcy report will tell us that the NHS is broken, and those who work in it will agree. There is things we can do, but there's going to be massive system changes required, and that upheaval makes it really challenging for staff. Burnout is at an all-time high, making it even more challenging. And we don't even mention finance, but of course we're in a significant financial black hole, making it really challenging to be innovative and creative. And yeah, that's exactly what we're going to have to do if we're going to survive.
And I think you talk about being creative, and I think that's where AHPs do come in. We'll find a way to work together and pull together in terms of creating and finding solutions and ways to go forward. I think some of the challenges are around retention. I think we talk a lot around recruitment, and then we get people in, but it's what the support looks like. We have the NHS long-term plan, we've got the people promise, all these factors that matter. But do we ever stop? Do we have that bandwidth and resource to stop and actually support? So I think I would like to have the retention piece as someone comes through the doors, or even when they actually get the job, to start looking at how we retain them and how to maintain or grow their skills. What is it that they want to do, and how can they stay in this wonderful NHS? Because it could look like it's broken, but we all wake up every single day and come into the system because we want to do, as you said, Vicky, it's a vocation. It's what we want to do, to work in the NHS.
And I know the question is more about the challenges, but as I was saying earlier on, I'm always trying to be a bit solution focused as well. I mean, I'll probably talk from a community perspective, because that's the organisation that I have worked the most in, and that's the space that I've worked the most in. And we're in this phase of transition in that 2010, the Transforming Community Services white paper was presented, and there was a lot of competition introduced, and people went sort of different ways in their own individual organisational priorities and challenges. I think the answers and the solution lies in more collaboration. There is nothing stopping us as as organisations within in a big system to collaborate better. And I think there is already positive steps happening. We can already see some changes, some consultations going on to sort of look at, well, how can we work together as two providers and collectively try and resolve a problem. Finances, as you say, is a massive, and I think whilst there will be a lot of turbulence when you try to do that, because each individual organizations have their own politics and their own challenges, their own existential crises and things like that. I think the answer lies in more collaboration and more partnership working at a system level to improve the experience of the patients that we serve, really.
And I think our reality is negotiable. I've said it already today. But if we can think it, we can create it, we can make it happen.
Absolutely.
And we have to do that collectively. That might mean that we have to come out of our comfort zones and move across professions, thinking creatively about how and what people are doing to make the best impact for patients.
And I think the other challenge from a system perspective is obviously the population health. So we've got an ageing population in Humber and North Yorkshire with significant comorbidities, and our life expectancy is halted with more years of ill health. So I think, and the position for those in the most deprived areas are amplified with worse outcomes and worse experience. So I think that's another big challenge that we need to, picking up on your point, Christy, around changing the dynamic into more the prevention and addressing the health inequalities is a really important challenge that we need to get our heads around and move forwards with.
The reality is that a lot of the things that we used to do as healthcare as well, that's part of standard care, has become like, nice to do's now. So people are not really, well, we can't blame them because they haven't got the headspace to really look above the parapet and say, well, there's a problem there. I need to sort of know I'm going to deal with my workload today. And I really don't have the time to see all the patients. And burnout is a real issue. And probably that is a symptom of, or that is one of the reasons why people are not really trying to address that. And that's where I think actually in partnership work and in collaboration is where some of the solutions lie, really.
And you mentioned earlier about, the problem at the front door in A&E isn't the problem at the front door, is it? We've got to stop people coming into the wrong place at the beginning. And it would be remiss of us not to mention right to rehab and proactive care rather than reactive care from an AHP point of view. We are ideally placed to support some of that front end education and development delivery out in community.
Great. So let's move our focus on to equality, diversity, inclusion. So as a leader, how do you promote diversity in the workforce, and how do you provide equality and diversity and inclusion in your leadership? Noma, we'll start with you.
Well, I think, as I said before, role modelling. For me, it's understanding that with our differences, we've got commonality. I talk a lot around intersectionality, and you pointed out again, sitting on this panel here, we're very diverse, but we've got so much in common that binds us together and brings us to a common goal. So I think I lead in that sense to recognize people's differences, but be inclusive in my practice, be inclusive in how I speak. When I don't know something, I'm curious, and I go out and inquire and find out and learn about it, and not to be afraid. Lately, I've seen that people are so terrified to make a mistake, but it only takes asking in a confident and safe space, because we all learn. Each day is an opportunity to learn something new. So where I'm not comfortable, where I don't know topics, I tend to find someone and be that ally they need, because I don't have to identify in a certain way to understand a topic, but I can support through allyship. And I think it's the big agenda we need to look at. One of the other things I think I see in the communities that we serve is that our communities are diverse. So we can't expect to bring our values of how we were brought up or who we are into someone's door when we knock in your community teams, as you're saying. We can't go to someone's home expecting them to be like us and prescribe things that suit us and not their lifestyle. So it's leaning in and understanding that difference. We're not saying change everything. We're saying understand a day in the life of that different person. Leaving people in a team isolated and not talking to them because you're terrified to say the wrong thing. goes against our practice, because then again, we're discriminatory in our ways. So it's talking to people in a team. If there's words that they say that you don't understand, I posted something on LinkedIn the other day around accents. I have an accent. I've tried for many years to infiltrate a, community, speak in a different way. I am Zimbabwean, and I'm proudly so. And part of that is the way I say things, the way I pronounce things. I was taught how to speak English when I was 3. And therefore, the way I may say things, the shock of my life coming to live in the north and hearing words shortened, I was thinking, where's the rest of the word? But I've learned to understand. My children speak and sound different to me, but we all have that. We understand each other. So I dream in my language, and it's not a disadvantage to dream and speak in a different language. So English is my second language. It's not my first, but it doesn't make me less qualified as an occupational therapist. It doesn't make me less qualified as a leader, as an individual. So let's stop judging people just because we can't understand them. I've heard people being so impatient. They want to finish off someone's sentence because, they're very slow in the way they speak. But that difference, understand a person's journey, hear the stories of how our internationally trained colleagues have come across this wonderful NHS I go back to. Why us? Why England? They could have chosen Australia, sunny Australia, America or Canada, but they love to work in the NHS. There's something about the NHS that we do, and it's that inclusive practice that we've always done. The Commonwealth has always been something that we work and strive to. So how to be a good leader who looks at equality, diversity and inclusion? It's in threading it into everything. It's not an act when you see someone who's different to call upon them all the time, but it's part of the challenge of making sure in your practice every single day, there's a patient out there who doesn't look like you, but what are you doing to lean in?
I totally echo with Norma. Just before we were starting this podcast, we were talking, weren't we, Rachel, about maybe having an AHP strategy or something, and we were just saying actually many organisations may have an equality, diversity, inclusion strategy, but it's about us leaders really living it. The strategy might be published, but many people might have not actually read it. And our own NHS England AHP strategy talks about belonging being a word. So equality, diversity, inclusion, everybody's familiar with. But unless you feel that you belong to something, you don't really feel that that you can contribute, that your contributions is valuable. So how do we as leaders create that sense of belonging? Psychological safety is a big word that comes to mind, and it's as leaders really, there might be pertinent points somebody's saying, or somebody might be afraid of saying something because they think like, well, I'm new to this country, I've only just come here, or I'm new to this team. Would my opinion be as valued as somebody else who's very senior in this team? And they might have reservations because of whatever background they are from, or accent, or their qualifications, or whatever. So our support workforce, that's one thing I wanted to get across today, actually. As AHPs, we have a lot of non-registered workforce who are equally capable, equally competent, equally, ready to solve problems with us working as a team. And their voice needs to be heard as well. And creating that environment of psychological safety is so key as leaders that we need to embrace.
Wow, it's hard to follow that. But I suppose we were talking, Norma, before we came in the podcast, about our experience of international recruitment out in India and how we learned so much from the conversations that we had with our peers, with our colleagues that we met in India, and with the individuals who went through the process as well. And that understanding that diversity and difference, whether that's cultural, religious, or personality, actually, really helps us to be better grounded as individuals, as well as leaders. So some of it's not just about thinking about yourself as a leader, is it? It's about being a good human being, and treating people how you want to be treated.
And I think from a system perspective, we just need to acknowledge that we have the Humber and North Yorkshire Inc., which is the social media for inclusion, and we have the Inclusion Assembly, which is really important. And from an AHP leadership perspective and the AHP Council, we link and align very closely to make sure that we have regular updates from the Assembly. And I think the other thing to say is, from my personal perspective, I provide strategic leadership to the regional AHP BAME network, which has been extremely helpful to me to understand the challenges of our diverse workforce, and also for me to actively act as an ally on behalf of the region, but also on behalf of the system. And I agree, Noma, it is a golden thread through absolutely everything that we do.
Absolutely, and I think sometimes we hear people's stories, the journey they're on, and sometimes people talk about this topic, which is weathering, because if you're going through it and you are sometimes the role model or the voice of, it's weathering and exhausting. And as you were saying, it's providing psychological safe spaces for people to tell their stories, but maybe finding new ways of which people can share these stories in a safe way. And as chair of the Couple BAME Strategic Advisory Group, we're looking at different policies that come through. We read those through the lens of our workforce. So sometimes it's not about me sharing my journey, but influencing practice, policy. So maybe thinking about that, how does it link into everything? It's in the way we do things and how we do things.
Great. So I think we're coming to the end of our podcast. So I think the last question that I would like to discuss is, what are your top tips for embarking on a leadership journey?
I can go first if that's all right. I mean, I've got maybe three. Top three maybe, if I can suggest. And one of them, Norma's already mentioned. Never be afraid of failure. That's the first thing. Because I give a simple example. That there's always learning from failures, and I see so many times that actually people hesitant to go for leadership roles, thinking that, oh well. I mean, I experienced this myself when I was a team leader as a Band 7 physiotherapist, thinking, well, I've only been a Band 7 for 7 months, 8 months now. There is a Band 8A opportunity, and there is somebody who's been a 7 already for 2-3 years, and then thinking, it's probably competition, etc. But there's always some learning. I didn't go for it, and actually somebody external got the job, and you both sat there thinking, you're kicking yourself, that, God, why didn't I go for it? And then my other colleague is saying, why didn't you go for it? And I'm like, I thought I wanted to avoid the competition. So it's like, there's never be afraid of failure. A simple example, you go for a driving test after taking 300 hours of driving, learning lessons. But the learning you get from that 20 minutes when the inspector at the end says, sorry, you have failed, it's like, God, you sit back and think there is so much. So that's the first one, never be afraid of failure. The second one, I've been reading a book just recently, and it's a guy called Jordan Peterson. He's a clinical psychologist. He's widely published, millions and millions of copies. The first one is 12 Rules for Life, so I'd highly recommend that. The second book is Beyond Order, and rule number 7, he says, work as hard as you possibly can on one thing and see what happens. And the one thing for me would be relationship building. Whether it's the window cleaner that you see on your way in, or the receptionist, or the person who's doing the gardening outside. As you go up on your leadership ladder, really important skill to have your relationship building. And the third one, as AHPs, I would say, trust your instincts. You are trained to be problem solvers. If your instinct tells you that the solution to a problem lies in something, be bold to actually present that and say, well, that's what I think where the solution is. So that would be my 3.
Fab.
Okay, and I think probably we'll all agree by the end of it that all of these are important. So I'll try not to say the same things. But I would say that self-reflection, self-understanding is a key thing to grow on your journey. Remembering that leadership is a journey. It's not something that people have when they start their careers. It's something that happens over a lifetime. I'm still learning. I'm sure we all are. doing that enables us to communicate better, to build relationships, to enable and to influence and negotiate when we get into them tricky conversations about resources or whatever that might be. So knowing yourself is really, really important, and knowing others is probably the second bit that goes with that, but I'm not counting that as a separate one. My next one is give it a go. Ask for permission. So never ask for permission, just have a crack at it. As long as we're not putting patients at risk, we can have a go. There's lots of improvement methodology out there to help us do that, and loads of senior leaders will encourage and support that methodology. Just have a go, see what you can do. Again, it's a bit like you're working really hard. And I suppose the other bit for me is always curiously question. Doesn't matter if you don't know the answers, but by curiously questioning, you'll understand what's needed and be able to go and find the people who can help you.
Yeah, and I agree with my colleagues. You're getting the top tips here, and I think it's coaching. Look for a mentor or a coach, and it's a lifelong commitment. You can move them around as you need them. I have a bank of mentors, and I'm also a mentor for some people in different topics. Coaching, I still seek coaching, and you can stop and start as you go. So it's an ongoing journey around understanding something or seeking that knowledge, as Vicky's pointed out as well. Look for people around you. And also, I would say it's owning up to when you've missed the mark. And I think it's something that my two colleagues have also just mentioned. We learn from our mistakes. Transparency is the key. You're better off showing up and not being prepared and saying, I did not prepare this, rather than coasting and ignoring or not responding to things as you should. So I'd say honesty and transparency are jointly next to each other. And then top tip, AHP world is a small world. Be kind. Travel this journey in a nice and kind way. Relationships, again, it's a big thing. People don't forget you. People don't forget the first impression of you. Even if it's the wrong one, you'll be standing thinking, I'm actually a nice person, but it's how people receive you. So top tip, small world, be kind.
Wow, well, I don't know how to follow any of those. I agree with Vicky that leadership is a journey, and I have been very opportunistic in my journey to my present role. So I would say that my top tips are be brave and be bold, and challenge yourself and put yourself outside of your comfort zone in order to be able to grow, and go for opportunities that perhaps aren't traditional AHP opportunities, to broaden your view and see things from a slightly different perspective.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Noma. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Vicky. That is the end of our podcast. Bye-bye.